Steven, how are you doing?
Hey Joel, I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. You're living the life. I see the
Uh,
background. People that don't know,
it's
I we spent some time together in Miami Beach where you live, and I mean it's getting nicer out here in Leipzig, but yeah, that's the life. Absolutely.
it's a beautiful day today. It really
Yeah,
is. Low humidity, sunny for all intents and purposes. I can see no clouds, and we've got obviously beautiful ocean to the left of me down here. So
yeah,
there's just so many good things to be thankful for.
absolutely. Amen. All right. Let's dive in. A few weeks ago on the show, we talked about Michael Burry, the investor made famous by The Big Short, the man who predicted the 2008 housing collapse and turned it into one of the greatest trades in financial history. And we talked about his latest bet, a 1.1 billion short position against AI, specifically against Nvidia and Palantir. At the time, a lot of people called it crazy. Nvidia was the most valuable company in the world. Jensen Huang was signing t-shirts for fans. The AI boom seemed unstoppable. Well, since then, Nvidia's stock has dropped over 30% from its peak. This didn't happen because the business fell apart. Nvidia just reported Q4 earnings this week. 73% revenue growth, beat every estimate on Wall Street, and the stock still dropped 5% the next day. So what's actually going on? Today we're going to break down the key reasons behind this drop. DeepSeek, tariffs, big tech building their own chips, and ask the question Burry has been asking all along. Is the AI boom running ahead of reality? Stephen, I want to give you the first rundown of a couple of numbers here and hear your initial
Sure.
reaction. We did an entire episode about Michael Burry's bet just recently, but a couple of things because he opened a Substack, I believe, for people to buy into for like $10 a month and get stock tips from one person. I might actually take stock tips if I ever were to do so. But so what Michael Burry said, he called it sort of the purest play on AI because he really bet on the fact in case of Nvidia that if AI spending slows down, which we've seen that some companies really trimmed down their capex when it comes to AI all over, like Microsoft, that Nvidia really has nowhere to hide because they're out of this whole AI bubble, one of the few ones that are actually working with physical matter in relation to the other companies. And then also one thing that when we're talking about numbers here, what he flagged as well was that in the last year, Nvidia's purchase obligations rose from 16 billion to 95 billion. Non-cancelable orders placed before the demand is even confirmed. When you see those numbers, 30% drop in that time since Burry did that big position on AI. Would your initial reaction be that he's probably right or that the market is overreacting?
I'm going to say that Burry is kind of right in the sense that there's a hype related to the use of AI to solve world hunger here, right? And it's not being used to solve world hunger, by the way. It's
Hmm.
being used for entertainment primarily. I mean, research, yes, but definitely entertainment factor. And I think we should be very aware of separating the business or enterprise use case from the commercial consumer use case, which is very much about what you and I like to do with
Hmm.
ChatGPT or with Claude or something else. Like in the business, in the enterprise, you're going to be using things like Copilot. You might be using Claude, Anthropic's Claude as well, but because they are more tuned sort of towards business use cases, they're also more secure from a perspective of data sovereignty and those kind of things. But that said, I think Burry is projecting a bit. He's looking at a hype market, and he's looked at hype markets before. I mean, he was looking at, obviously, back in the day. He had his perspective on .com. He had his perspective on the housing market in '08 and '09. So he's looking at the big mega trends and saying, guys, these things are going to burst. They're bubbles, and just be ready for it. But what we've seen after every bubble bursts is there's a great reset. So you
Hmm.
have this potential, and everyone gets exuberant about it, and then they all start saying it's going to solve all our problems. But then something bad happens, like the housing collapse in 2000, the recession in 2009. This is obviously a bad thing, but we've seen housing more than rebound since then. So it's not like these things are forever.
Hmm.
They're temporary and they're bad, but Burry has a sense of these things. And I think that's why I say he's kind of right. I think also if we look at Nvidia's in this for the long haul. This company's been around for what, 25 years or so?
Right.
They figured out how to take a a general, well, actually a special purpose device for one application and actually make it even better for a second application. That second application was the first device was the GPU. And they said, look, this is for gaming. The second application was for AI. They didn't figure this out until data scientists started using GPUs to accelerate model development. When they realized in training that a GPU could accelerate that training process, voila, there's your second use case. It all of a
Right.
sudden became not just about a kid using a GPU to have better frames per second in, their Call of Duty game. Now it's all about processing models. So they figured
Hmm.
this out. They're smart enough to do that. So I think what's going to happen with Nvidia is they're going to figure this out again because they're a
Yeah.
technology company. So I'm not betting against Nvidia and I'm not betting against Burry and his particular position. I'm just saying it's not all in. It's not 100% certainty.
I mean, you compared it to the dot-com bubble, and so did Burry. He compared this to
Yeah.
Cisco and the dot-com bubble. He
Yes.
called it a great product with real demand, but it was just wildly overbuilt. And I mean,
Yes.
if you look at some of the numbers in capex for ChatGPT or for OpenAI, the numbers they put out in their, I mean, we talked about it before. OpenAI was looking for investments over 400 billion for a single calendar year, which is more than private equity came up for all investments across startups in the Western Hemisphere. That's just
Hmm.
outrageous numbers. And then just the market cap of Nvidia was just outrageous, which it's usually you see those kind of market caps in companies that have primarily non-physical products, platform oriented companies like Google or Spotify
Amazon.
that sell a service and not a product. Yeah, Amazon. But here you're talking about physical products, about chips. And one thing, and this is the second part of this that I want to get into is sort of the political aspect of this, because I mean we've seen with the Trump administration in its first year a lot of changes to business as it's been done before. But so in January 2025, Chinese startup DeepSeek claimed, nobody can really prove it, but they claimed that they built a Chat GPT level 4 equivalent for just $6 million compared to over
Hmm.
100 million for OpenAI and development costs. In that single day after that announcement, in that single day, Nvidia lost 600 billion in market cap. If somebody has their retirement money in Nvidia, or at least just whatever 10%, you're going to have a hard day.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
insane amount of market cap or the evaluation this company has had from that announcement, which still, you're not really sure. Are they bluffing or are they being real about the low cost they had for creating such an
Hmm.
AI model? But at the same time, you're sort of wondering, is this capex amount that each company has been running, just the money that's been circulating in that industry and been thrown around in investments and capex, is that necessary? Or if you can do it a lot cheaper, why do you even need those really expensive Nvidia chips? So the DeepSeek reaction, I would probably say, was an overreaction. And I mean, the Chinese, if you really being honest, they don't have a lot of morals when it comes to economic policy and politics. Not saying that the U.S. is so much better, or Germany, or
Right.
anyone, but at the same time, I would say part of it is a bluff. But I think it's a conversation worth having if that amount of money, that amount of capex, that amount of investment is really necessary to get this industry up and going. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think the DeepSeek experiments and what we saw, they've sort of faded since. But what we saw was a challenge to the market, the norm of the market, which is to say that you can only do this one way.
Right.
I've had the opportunity to be a part of a few disrupted companies that really looked at things differently. And when they implemented and they built their products, they took a vastly different approach. I think DeepSeek is taking that same approach, which is saying, hey, we can take old GPU Gen 2 infrastructure. We don't have to do this next gen, high throughput, high performance stuff. We can take the old clunky stuff, strap it together in a medium-sized data center that doesn't take as much power and cooling related impact, so lower energy footprint, and we can get similar or better results. That's ingenuity, and I think that should be celebrated. The claims are still kind of disputed, so I wouldn't say it's absolutely true. And of
Hmm.
course, we know the Chinese have a habit of pirating, so
Yeah.
they're basically taking someone else's work and then effectively co-opting that. But regardless of all that, markets need competition. So what we really need is more NVIDIAs. We need and we're seeing that with AMD, we're seeing it with
Yeah.
Qualcomm. All those silicon semiconductor companies are all trying to do the same thing that Nvidia is doing. Intel's doing it as well. Intel wasn't as successful in this market. I would argue that Intel tried to take their consumer-based business and apply that to the enterprise, and they weren't seeing the same kind of results. Nvidia has been able to do it for both. And
Hmm.
the number one, by the way, let's not forget, the number one consumer of these products is not some insurance company on the corner that has a small, regional office. The number one consumer of these products are the hyperscalers. That's
Hmm.
Google, that's Microsoft Azure, it's Amazon, EC2, and all that infrastructure that they power the cloud with. It's not a typical business. It
Yeah.
is a hyper growth, high performance, mega cluster, large scale data center design. We talked about this in a couple episodes ago as well, that data center buildouts are not stopping.
Yeah.
So if data center buildouts are continuing to increase, that shows the viability of this market to challenge maybe what Burry's talking about. Nvidia's got a foothold in those hyperscalers.
Mm.
This is a market. It needs competition. It needs player one, two, three to step up and say, we can do better than Nvidia. We can do the same. We can do it cheaper. And that's what DeepSeek was saying. Like, look, you can do the exact same thing that OpenAI is doing, but on like basically moderately priced, lower power infrastructure. That's actually a good thing if that's
Yeah.
true. If there were startups in the space that just said, I want to be more power efficient, I want to be lower cost, they could effectively challenge this market for NVIDIA. I think AMD is trying to do that. I think Intel and Qualcomm are
Absolutely.
trying to do that.
Yeah. So just what you said, I mean, the backbone of a healthy capitalistic economy is competition across the
Yes.
board. So in the hindsight of the last year, big tech is starting to either build their own chips or just
Yes.
diversify their sourcing. So, for example, Google's TPUs, which they just used internally previously, are now being rented to Meta. Meta just signed a, I think, 5 year, $60 billion deal with AMD this
Hmm.
past week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, before, when you looked at it without being super deep into the topic, you would have thought that Nvidia was the only real competitor or the only
Yeah.
real viable company to do this because
Yes.
the demand was there in such incredible amounts that nobody had the infrastructure to build it. People were losing sleep over the possibility of
Yeah.
Taiwan being invaded because that's like where half the chips comes from.
Yeah. TSMC.
So I think it's only good for the industry to have more competitors building these chips out, and you know the competition driving the research around how you can make that cheaper and less cost efficient, less cost intensive, less resource intensive, and then you, because that gives you an control over things like tariffs, which is one of the
Yeah.
favorite words of Donald Trump, which he certainly did last year, which also hit Nvidia pretty hard. In early 2025, their stock fell 37% between January and April because the export control on their H20 chips, the sort of the China market version, led to a $5.5 billion charge and increase for Nvidia, because then the U.S. government put their finger on the exports from China to the U.S. market. I mean, there's so many impacts and influences you can have, but what I still want to what I still don't understand about it. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that. Um, so as you look at this industry now, what's your sort of prediction for this to happen? Do you think Nvidia is, if even if they lose a lot of market power when it comes to chips, or they're going to diversify their own services and products and have different competitors come in, or what would, if gun to your head, what would be your idea of the future when it comes to this part of the AI industry?
I would say every refresh cycle that the NVIDIA product lines will go through they will strive to keep share and win more share. So the way these innovation cycles go, when they're building new chips, when they're building new models, they're always trying to build something better and bigger and faster, right?
Mm,
So as the technology continues to evolve, it will become more power efficient. It will also become more cost effective. This is inevitable. With the more competition in the market, the lower the prices are going to become. This just happens as a sort of aside. The one thing I would argue in this example is the costs of goods associated with building these products are currently in a little bit of flux because memory pricing, which is associated with the design of the GPU, the
Hmm.
memory is being sourced from different manufacturers like Micron, and the memory that's coming from these companies is also experiencing shortages based on the desire and the demand of these manufacturers who are building GPUs. So what
Right.
you're going to see is the component costs are going to increase. So even if somebody said, I'm going to build a better mousetrap. It's going to be more power efficient. It's going to be more cost effective. It's going to hit a lower price point. It's going to save you money, Mr. Hyperscaler or Mr. Large Enterprise Data Center customer. All the components associated with that device, if NVIDIA wants to increase or remain at the same level where it is profitability wise, they have to control their costs.
Hmm.
This is a very delicate ecosystem and a very delicate supply chain.
Hmm.
If we see shortages in chips that are related to the end product, which is a GPU, you're going to see the cost of GPUs continue to rise. So all players are going to charge more for their devices.
Yeah.
But if we can somehow create more competition in the component market, such as what the component market that Micron and Broadcom play in, then you can help control those costs or even drive those costs down. So I think this is a very delicate supply chain issue. It's not just NVIDIA. NVIDIA happens to be the end product that the customer purchases. But you have to
Right.
look at the suppliers behind that. They're also going through a tremendous amount of tension in the market related to being able to source their products. The tariffs have something to do with that. So until we get to a point of stability, and I think we will, you're going to see, I think, those market players still dominate and they're going to charge higher prices. I would bet on challengers to NVIDIA being AMD, Qualcomm, and Intel. And maybe not in that order, but I would definitely bet on those three challengers. And I would say if they can control their component costs, if they can improve their performance and scale from a GPU perspective, they can sway some of these large customers to purchase their devices. That's how you beat NVIDIA. You don't beat NVIDIA by slapping tariffs on them. You beat NVIDIA by building a better product and controlling your supply chain costs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that because, competition will usually
Drives markets.
bring the better outcome for anyone
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So the next story also has something to do with tension, but this is less about the stock market and more about, politics and probably more of a societal issue or conversation to be had. All right, let's move on to our second story. And this one is unfolding as we record. This week, one of the most powerful AI companies in the world went head to head with the United States military, or also known as the War Department. And it did not blink. Anthropic, the company behind the AI model Claude, has been working with the Pentagon since last summer, a $200 million contract, the first AI ever cleared to operate on classified military networks. By all accounts, the military loved it. But then the Pentagon came back with a demand. Remove all safeguards. Give us unrestricted access. Let us use Claude however we see fit, including for mass surveillance of American citizens and for autonomous weapons that fire without a human in the loop. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei said no publicly on Thursday, quote, "We cannot in good conscience accede to their request." By Friday, the Trump administration responded by blacklisting Anthropic entirely. Every federal agency, every military contractor, you have 6 months to get Claude out of your systems. The Pentagon declared Anthropic as a supply chain risk, a designation normally reserved for Chinese companies suspected of espionage. Anthropic says it will see them in court. Anthropic published a very good public statement on their socials, Instagram, that's where I saw it, about this. But so let's talk about first what the Pentagon actually wanted. I want to push aside this, baby in a ball pit not wanting to leave and throwing a fit kind of thing that the administration is doing by blacklisting Anthropic and sort of putting them into the same corner as DeepSeek and any other Chinese copycat company that's out there. And the first thing I had to think of was during the Super Bowl, there was a commercial by Ring Camera. They made a commercial about how you can find your dog through your neighborhood's Ring door cameras while just uploading a picture of your dog, and then it's going to find the golden retriever through those cameras while without the active acceptance of the person that owns that Ring camera to let you use their network to find that. So number one, the Pentagon wanted unrestricted access to Claude, not just for whatever it was for, in one, as I said before, public surveillance of American citizens, and then also for automated weapons. Another thing we talked about before, like what happens
Yeah.
if a machine makes a decision that
Yeah.
leads into not, we didn't even talk about fatalities. We talked about just car accidents or just financial damages to private property. I guess I know your answer to this, but my question would be: is the Pentagon's position actually responsible? Because I mean, they bought a tool. Shouldn't they get to decide how to use it? And shouldn't they be able to eliminate sort of the impact by a different company that's not part of the administration to make key decisions about how that software works? It's almost, I don't want to do it, but I think I should for the sake of this question. It's like buying a Microsoft Outlook license for your company, and then Microsoft gets a say in if you're able to read your team's chat messages from your employees or not, for example. So do you think their position, without putting aside all this drama and Trump throwing a fit and Hegseth throwing a fit, is it a reasonable general topic, or is this sort of the deal you make buying software from companies?
Okay, so when you think about software like Outlook or Teams or something like that, there's a sort of a boundary on, what the technology can do, will do. It's a fairly reasonable boundary. I mean, email systems, obviously there's the potential, there's a very open potential to sniff that email, to be able to read your employees' email. And most companies publicly state that they have the right to, and they actively monitor email. So there's no such thing as privacy in the enterprise. With respect to a society where it's not the four walls of a corporation, which can effectively, inside those four walls, dictate the outcomes of everyone who uses the systems.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about technology that's being used in the public forums, meaning in society, I think it's very different. And I think I kind of commend the folks at Anthropic for their principled stand. And what they're saying is basically, we understand that AI, because we're building it, we understand that AI has amazing potential, but there are amazing risks associated with it. So what they're offering the government is responsible, ethical AI. They're saying,
Mm-hmm.
look, you have to have these guardrails in place because we know of the potential damage that could come. They're almost tipping their hand and saying, this stuff is a lot more powerful than you even know. And
Mm-hmm.
we want to keep those guardrails in place. And I think all AI companies and all companies that are building AI technology should be very thoughtful of these issues related to ethical and responsible use of those systems. And it's not just about privacy, it could be about risk used. You had highlighted before, I see on the streets of Miami Waymos driving around. There's nobody in them. They're just
Mm-hmm.
learning. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to get in a Waymo. I don't know about you.
No,
I'm
no.
scared shitless. I don't want to give that thing another 5 years or so to learn all about how people behave before you get inside it. But that said, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think it's okay for the government to ask to take the guardrails, but I think it's fine for Anthropic to say, sorry, no, we will not allow that.
Yeah.
Again, back to competition, there are other systems out there that would maybe allow them to do that. Palantir probably is way more lenient about this. We know already that Amazon has done work for the government for years, and Amazon is more lenient about these things. So
Yeah.
it's a different part of the stack, but it is, the government is the biggest consumer of these technologies. I also think the government's not giving themselves enough credit or opportunity because, I mean, you're talking about the federal government in the United States invented the internet. Sorry, not Al
Right.
Gore. The Department of Defense invented the internet. These are smart people. So, they should take the basic building blocks of these technologies and they could build their own. If they want to build something that is totally invasive and completely guardrail free, they should
Mm-hmm.
just build something from the open source themselves. And I mean, they've built an entire, half century on
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of technologies. They can do this, right? So
Yeah.
I think what they want is an accelerant. They want
Mm-hmm.
somebody's technology that will help accelerate. This is a space race, and they're grasping for straws. They're going, look, is Claude going to be the best technology to help me beat China? Is
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Copilot? Is OpenAI? What do I have to use? I think that they need to look more introspectively at what their design goals are and figure out who is the right partner to supply them. Ethics aside, if they want to do things like that, They need to find the right partners who will help them facilitate that. I don't think it's a good idea to run guardrail free because the garbage in, garbage out factor is huge in AI.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
need to be very conscious that AI hallucinates, that AI is prone to mistakes and errors. You do
Yep.
not want an unmanned drone killing people on a battlefield when it makes mistakes.
Yep.
You don't do that. You don't do that. So that's my perspective on it. I think that the government needs to be more introspective about what their goals are. And if they want to do this, they have to look at themselves and say, we'll build it ourselves.
Absolutely. So the last part about this that I want to get into is sort of the business side of things for especially Entropic or their point of view from this. So they lost a $200 million contract, which from what I've seen hasn't even shaken their stock value
Right.
or their standing. They rose in just a couple of days to the most downloaded app in the free part of the App Store. And then as soon as ChatGPT took that deal, it's sort of like an uneven balance. Anthropic shot up and ChatGPT had a decrease in users like crazy. The business decision here is the one that I mean, obviously now when you know the outcome, when you've seen what happened after that decision by the CEO, you can give him kudos and you're good for
Yeah.
you stepping up. And it might have been a different situation if it was a different government, a different administration, because obviously they like to make a big fuss out of a lot of things. But in this case, number one, sort of what's the situation for that CEO like, having this decision to be made and, evaluating the plus and minus side, which in this case has turned out positive. So what's your opinion on, is this a smart business decision for Anthropic long term? Is to be sort of known as the AI company that stood up to the government who allegedly tried to, in a way, probably abuse the software, or is this gonna bite them back down the road?
I will give you an emphatic yes, it is a smart move for them. Apple,
Mm-hmm.
you have to go back over a decade. There was a terrible incident in California. There was a domestic terrorists couple that went and killed a bunch of people. Apple, the federal government, I think the state agencies, the FBI, seized the devices after the event and they were going to force Apple to unlock the phones. Apple refused to unlock the phones. And they said, our platform is secure, we honor data privacy, and we will not divulge the key generation algorithms to the government because we do not want the technology to be used against citizenry.
Mm-hmm.
Even if these two people were horrible, and they were, for doing a terrible act, the idea was we don't want to unleash the potential so the government can keep doing this if they decide to unlock, say, they're, somebody they're running against, potentially they're running against and they use this technology for bad. So what I would say, an opponent, for instance, what I would say is they stand to gain the same opportunity that Apple gained in that scenario, which is they become defined as the most private, privacy centric, secure platform for AI. They stand to gain the same outcome as Apple if they hold to their guns, which is, we don't divulge to the government how we make the algorithm work. Your data is private, your prompts are secret, your information's safe. That's exactly the Apple play.
Mm-hmm.
Apple's stock has not had any issues. It has had meteoric rise since that time, defined the brand as focused on privacy, and they've only seen success. So I think what you saw in the market was a reaction to that same challenge, which is I use your system. I trust you. Don't let the government gain access to my information. And I
Yep.
think
Yep.
that's what you were seeing with ChatGPT, where OpenAI was seeing some after effect of that decision. And now they're being seen as a platform that potentially operates with the government and can, will share information with the government. I think that's a negative
Yeah.
for OpenAI. And I think it's a huge positive for Anthropic. And by the way, like these are news cycles in 24, 48, 72 hours. People forget about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's Anthropic's opportunity for the in their brand and their marketing not to forget about it. Continue to play it,
Absolutely.
double down on it.
Yep.
And I guarantee you they become one of the leaders in the space based on their adherence to their principles and the privacy.
Yep.
I can't state it even stronger than that. If they keep
Yep.
going with this, they will carve out a deep trench between them and their competitors.
Yep, absolutely. And I gotta admit here that I just recently, not because of this, but in general, switched from Chat GPT to Claude, and it's the better product. To me, it's genuinely the better product than Chat GPT. It's the same pricing. It's about
Yeah.
$22 or $23 a month for the premium version. They have the Claude code as well. To sort of, it's almost like an IDE in the Claude desktop
Yep.
version that
It's
you can
amazing.
get.
Amazing.
It's outstanding. It's outstanding. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Well,
got a
Stephen.
vibe coding, really cool vibe coding interface. I've seen it. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And you can include it into your Excel sheets, and
Yep.
they're doing great things, and I this gives this decision to me gave me a warmer
Yeah.
feeling of trust about this whole industry, and sort of away from this shaky Sam Altman guy where you're just not sure what to think of him. But so yeah, I'm with you on that one. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, Joel. Take care.
Bye.